Moving to another country can be very stressful, and for good reason. It's a huge change of things, a huge change in your life, and it's a huge risk as well. We have gone through the same process about 1.5 years ago, and I decided to make this video about our experience and our tips and tricks that we can give you for your move to be less stressful. So this video is probably going to be long. I will put up the chapters and the timestamps somewhere on the screen and also in the description of the video, so you can scroll to the section that interests you. This is not by any means a comprehensive guide. It's just about our experience and what we have learned about the process and what tips we can give. I'm trying to make this as universal and make it in a way that it applies to many countries, but our experience is with Denmark, so some of the sections are going to be specific to that country. I will also be referring to a lot of websites and resources. Those links are also going to be in the description. I think as a first step, you should decide where you want to go. If you're not happy where you are, you might even have a country that you have decided and laid your eyes on. Maybe you've been on holiday somewhere and you like the place and you want to move there. I would recommend not to decide based on a holiday. There's a lot of other things that I would recommend to look at. First of all, I would look at the average wage in each country on the local purchasing parity. In order to know what's good money, you have to look at the money, the average wages, in terms of how much the money is worth where you want to spend it. So how good are the wages compared to the prices? But that's just one thing. You should also look at where are the countries where you can even be legally, like which countries is it easy for you to find work. Me and my wife, we're both European Union citizens. We're from Hungary, so moving from one EU country to the other, we have the right to take work. If we can find work, then we have a right to take that. If you're not from an EU country, then you have to go through a process and get a work permit. So that's another recommendation. A very important one is weather, especially here in Denmark, right? It can be rainy, it can be foggy. And I can recommend a good website or service. It's called weatherspark.com. So if you go to Weatherspark, you can actually compare the climates of different cities. And then you can see what are the temperature ranges, what is the winter like, what is the summer like. You can compare it to the city where you live currently. You can see how does it feel. You can see how many hours are there where there's sunlight, how windy it is, and so on and so forth. So based on that, you have a pretty good idea of what it's like. Another important thing is culture. What are the people like? What are their values? Are they hardworking, or do they value work-life balance? How easy is it to make friends there? What's their general temperament? What is their attitude towards internationals? All of that can be a decisive factor. You should also consider how difficult the language is to learn. There's actually a list made by the US government. Every language is put into a group based on how difficult it is to learn them. There are easy languages and there are more difficult languages. That's another thing to consider. Also consider the distance from home. Like if you have friends and family in your current country, if you move somewhere, how often will you be able to move back? How are you going to keep in touch, and how much freedom you will have? Here in Denmark, it takes us one full day to drive to Hungary, and we can do that tomorrow. If we moved to New Zealand or Australia or Canada, then it would take much more, obviously. It would cost more, and it would be kind of a barrier when it comes to keeping in touch. One more thing is the taxation, like how much are you expected to pay in tax, and are you okay with that? There are countries that are highly taxed and there are countries that are lower taxed. And it's important to know that no country is perfect. All of these things about these countries, there are pros and cons. One country is better in climate, the other is better in wages, the third one is better in people, whatever. So I think the important thing here is to choose one that is a good mix, and where you can put up with the things that are annoying and enjoy the things that are great. Okay, you pick the country, great. Now let's calculate if it makes sense to move there. Like, can you have more free money if you work there than you have right now? And in order to do that, you have to compare your cash flow right now with a cash flow that you expect to have in the new country. So take a look at all your spending in an average month right now and list how much you spend on rent, on utilities, on food, on transportation, including car payment, maintenance, petrol, public transport if you use that, how much you spend on insurance, how much you spend on communication like internet, telephone bills, subscriptions if you have, and how much you're gonna spend on basic grooming like a haircut, things like that. And what's on top of that, like what's left after paying all of these, let's call it your disposable income or free cash flow currently. So that's your starting point. You need to compare that with an expectation of what you expect to have in the next country. In order to do that, I use two websites. One is called numbeo.com, that's for the expenses, and the other one is glassdoor.com for the expected wage that I could get. On numbeo.com, you can type in a city, and in that city it will give you a pretty good idea of how much certain things cost. And from experience, I can tell that it's roughly accurate, and you can use that to list up like a list of expectations of how much rent and insurance and transportation, all of that is going to cost. Then go on to Glassdoor and get an idea of how much gross wage you can expect to make based on your profession and based on the jobs that you would be applying for. And then you need to calculate from that gross wage how much would be the net wage, because certain countries, Denmark included, are quite heavily taxed. There are multiple gross to net calculators on the internet. I have found one that I think is reliable, and I'm going to put that in the description. This is the closest to the real world numbers. If you know how much you are expecting to make and you know how much you are expecting to spend each month, then you can compare a disposable income currently and disposable income expectation in the country where you want to move to. And that has to be higher in the country where you want to move to, because if it's not, then you would be trading your current standard of living into a lower standard of living. And if that doesn't work out, I don't recommend continuing. This is very important. Okay, great. You know the country, you know that it's going to work out. Now you just need to find out how much money you need to make it happen. Like how much money you need to bridge your current situation to a future situation where you again will be cash flow positive. And to bridge that, there's a few things that you have to do and a few things to think about. The first is how much stuff do you want to move? And that depends on where you want to move, like how far is it, how practical is it to move stuff. Most people that come to Denmark arrive just with a few suitcases. They don't transfer furniture. Now, how much time do you need? Because if you work now and you have a job offer, then you can't just finish working on a Friday and pick up the job in a new country on a Monday. That's not really practical. You need some time to work on the things that are connected to the move. Like you need to move out of your current place, you need to transit to the new place, you need to actually travel there, you need to do all the administration, registering, getting a CPR number, find a new place to rent and move in there. That's going to take some time. And then there's also some time until you get your first payslip. The date when you get your first payslip, that's like the finish line. This is the distance or the time span to which you need to have enough money to bridge that. And in that time frame, you might need to buy a new car if you're not bringing your car. You might need to pay a deposit to the apartment where you're moving. And you also need to cover your cost of living during that period with some margin. It can be a lot of money. Like in our case, we saved for roughly 2 years to have enough money to cover that. We saved up roughly 10,000 euros and we needed 2 years to do that. And we pretty much burned all of it in 6 weeks' time. Half of that is in a deposit. You know, that gives you an idea of how much money it takes and what's the risk of it. You need to get it right. You need to get it right the first time. If you saved up the money that you need, you can now start to look for a job. I still don't recommend anyone to move to a country without a job offer because of how much time it takes to save the money that is involved in moving there. And then if you don't find a job in the time that you have money for, then you just blown all your savings that you worked hard to acquire. We moved with a job offer. It's more difficult, but that's the safe way. I'm not an expert on how to write CVs. I can only say what has worked for us. And there's a good resource, a YouTube channel called Professor Heather Austin. She has very good videos on how to write a CV, a resume, and she also has a template. I used her template. I also recommend finding the job in your field, and it helps if your field is international by nature. Let's say you work in sales and you transition from local sales to doing something in the regional office, so to speak, because then that job is regional and you can come over to another country and still do regional stuff. I think it's also a great thing to send cover letters simply because not many people do. So just by writing 3 sentences and filing a separate document, you can put yourself over the crowd. And you kind of need to, because for these positions, there's usually a lot of people applying internationally, and employers are only picking internationals if they cannot find someone locally. If they can find an international locally, that's great. But hiring someone from abroad and have them move there is risk for them because they don't know if you're going to stick around. And be prepared for rejections. Like, I have applied to dozens of positions where I knew that I'm a good fit, but just because I wasn't there physically, they didn't consider me first round. There was one company that contacted me after moving, like direct contacted me, but they didn't consider me when I was from Hungary. So these are the things that we have learned during our move. If you have more things to add, please put them in the comments. And if you have things to ask in the comments. I will try to reply to all of you. That was Beyond Cloudbase. I thank you for joining, and I'll see you in the next one.